Last Sunday's implosion gave way to another lousy run of baseball that deepened Minnesota's early hole and prompted a roster shakeup. But at least this week ended on a happier note than the last. What's up, everybody? This is Nick Nelson, and welcome to the Twins Daily Week in Review podcast, where you can get the full scoop on the past 7 days of Twins baseball, all in the span of about 20 minutes each Sunday evening. This content is also available on twinsdaily.com in written form. And if you go there, you can comment with your thoughts on the past week of Twins baseball, or even fire up your own blog to share your thoughts, and we encourage you to do so. But for now, let's get started with the weekly nutshell. This is a quick executive summary of the week that was before we go in a little deeper. It seemed as though the Minnesota Twins were emerging from their early season lull when they won 3 of 4 following that embarrassing blowout in the opener at Chicago a while back. They were on their way to moving within a game of 500 last Sunday, actually, before the bottom fell out. And that blown 6-run lead set the stage for a 2-5 week featuring some of the most uninspired, sloppy, disgraceful baseball you will ever witness on a major league field. I'm really not exaggerating here. If you watched it, I think you'd find it hard to disagree. At the end of last season, the Twins looked like a team that ran out of gas. Early this season, they looked like one that had no juice to begin with. Despite all the proclamations of lessons learned from that collapse and a restorative offseason that had everyone raving about the team's clean bill of health in spring camp, Minnesota generally looks even more lethargic now. On the bright side, the Twins did punctuate their week with a win after dropping 6 of the previous 7. Will that be the start of a true turnaround, or just another blip on the radar? We shall see, but for now, let's dive in and dissect the past 7 days in depth. With our weekly snapshot for Monday, April 7th through Sunday, April 13th, the Twins' record over the past 7 days played 7 games and went 2-5, leaving their overall record at 5-11 on the season. Their run differential over this week was just -1. They're outscored by only 1 run. So despite all the losses, not getting blown out, playing a lot of close competitive games, their overall run differential for the season stands at -13. Twins are 4th in the AL Central, and they are 4.5 games behind the division-leading Tigers after dropping that series against them. Quick look at last week's game-by-game results. On Monday, they opened the series in Kansas City with a 4-2 loss. The offense coming out flat in that game at Kauffman Stadium. The Correa, Buxton, and Larnach, sort of the 3 hitters that comprise the heart of the lineup, went 0 for 12 in that one. So you're going to score 2 runs when that happens. On Tuesday night, a crushing 2-1 loss. Pablo Lopez exiting with an injury, defense imploding with a huge Griffin Jax late error. Buxton again in that game, and Jose Miranda, really rough one against Cole Reagans and the Royals. They combined to go 0 for 7 with 7 strikeouts. Twins were able to bounce back and get a win behind Joe Ryan on Wednesday, 4-0. Ryan with 7 innings of shutout ball, sort of par for the course against the Royals for him. And then in the last game of the series, another lackluster performance from the Twins. They lose the game 3-2, lose the series, the offense going 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position in that 1-run loss. On Friday, they returned home to face the Tigers. Blew a 3-run lead with Jorge Alcala having a very rough outing in that game. Twins lose 7-6. On Saturday, kind of just a no-show from the lineup in this one, a 4-0 loss. Just 4 hits and 1 walk over 9 innings from the Twins offense in that one. And on Sunday, they were able to close out the week with a victory. Pretty crisp win, actually, over the Tigers to salvage a game in that series. Simeon Woods Richardson and the Twins bullpen combining to allow just 1 earned run on 5 hits and 1 walk with 12 strikeouts. Let's get started as we dive into this past week with some news and notes on the roster and on the injury front. Good breaks have been hard to come by for the Twins early this season, as I'm sure you're aware. And they caught another bad one on Tuesday night when Pablo Lopez was forced out of his start against the Royals in the 5th inning due to hamstring tightness. And he had been dealing in that game, which made it all the more difficult to stomach. Lopez was placed on the injured list with the diagnosis of a grade 1 strain, which is fortunately on the mild side. There seems to be some hope that he might just miss the minimum 15 days on the injured list, which would entail just missing a couple of starts. Lopez's injury seemed to open the door for Zebby Matthews, who has been red hot, carried his great spring into AAA where he's just been dominating. And he still might get a chance here soon, but David Festa was first to get the call, and he made his season debut on Friday night. in impressive fashion with 4 2/3 scoreless innings. Rocco Baldelli indicated that Festa will stick around and start again this coming Wednesday, so he seems to be the guy in that that top 5 with Lopez out. Although Matthews could still certainly find his way into a big league start next weekend. There has been some talk of the Twins stretching out to a 6-man rotation at some point, so we'll see. The continuing trend of short starts from that rotation, which is, partially being driven by some performance that hasn't been there, and also being driven by Rocco Baldelli's continued insistence on, keeping a pretty short leash on these guys and pulling them fairly early. We saw that a couple times this week, and it didn't work out all that well. That has forced Minnesota to cycle through arms at the back end of the bullpen just to keep fresh bullpen arms available, and that risks, losing some of your depth on waivers, which is the downside there. They were able to keep Darren McCoggan, who re-signed after being designated for assignment, and he returned to St. Paul. And we'll see if they can do the same with Scott Blewett, who was designated on Saturday to make room for Cody Funderburk. Funderburk announced his return by immediately giving up a 2-run homer, which has been just kind of that kind of season for the Twins. But it would be a shame to lose Blewett because, even compared to some of these other guys that they're pushing through waivers, I actually think he's a solid quality option, and he's pitched really well for them. After Saturday's game, the Twins optioned struggling Jose Miranda to Triple-A, paving the way for Brooks Lee's activation from the injured list. Lee started at third base on Sunday and had a much better re-entry to the Twins roster than Funderburk. Lee had an RBI single in his first at-bat. He figures to be the primary starter at the hot corner for the foreseeable future, with Miranda out of the picture. Let's talk about some of the highlights. There were some in a 2-5 week. Not a lot of great baseball, but some solid performances. So in the 12th game of the season, Joe Ryan finally delivered the rotation's first quality start against a non-White Sox opponent. He was brilliant in Kansas City on Wednesday night, stopping a 3-game skid with 7 innings of shutout ball. Ryan was effective and efficient. He threw 63 of 85 pitches for strikes. And through 17 innings this year, he has yet to allow a walk. So just pristine control, which we're pretty accustomed to from Joe Ryan, and also very accustomed to watching him obliterate the Royals. This is business as usual for him when it comes to facing this team against whom he is now 7-0 with a 1.30 ERA in 9 career starts. In a season where almost nothing is going right for the Twins, it's kind of funny that one of the few that does happen to be, at least so far, is one that at least I expected the least. Ty France at first base, looking really good. He signed a non-guaranteed $1 million deal at the very end of the offseason after drawing little interest league-wide. But France is looking much like vintage form in early action, to his credit. And he had a monster week. He went 11 for 25, 2 homers, 2 doubles, 2 walks, and 0 strikeouts. So if this is for real, that's huge. That's a huge pickup for an offense that just desperately needed this kind of boost from an unexpected contributor. France looked, he crushed really in Kauffman, and I guess that's kind of his history, but he brought it home and had a good series at Target Field too. Finally, I've got to give a shout out to my guy, Byron Buxton. He was well on his way to the lowlights section this week. He was 0 for 8 with 5 strikeouts in the first 2 games at Kauffman, and that included a golden sombrero on Tuesday night with 4 strikeouts. But in retrospect, knowing what we know now, you have to wonder if he was a bit distracted. He left the team and was gone on Wednesday and Thursday to attend his cousin's funeral in Georgia. His cousin passed away from a rare sickle cell disease, as reported by Phil Miller in the Star Tribune, which is really sad. So I'm glad he was able to go spend some time with the family. And he came back looking like a new man. He had 5 hits over the weekend against the Tigers, including a pair of home runs. All stole his 3rd base of the season. Buck just continues to look really healthy. He leads the majors in sprint speed at age 30. Still just running as fast as ever, outrunning the young, ultra-athletic Bobby Witt Jr. So great to see from Buxton. Hopefully he can keep it going and start building off of this. Turning to the lowlights of the past week, just at a high level, it just needs to be said that the start to this season has really been a complete debacle of untold magnitudes. If you followed the Twins for as long as I have, you've seen some bad years and ugly stretches, but nothing can quite compare to the steady drumbeat of inept, mistake-filled, scared-of-the-moment play that has been put forth through these first 16 games. There have been no convincing signs of relief or turnaround at any time, really, although they did at least manage to snap another 3-game losing streak at week's end. Day after day, this looks like a team with no will or ability to overcome their opponents, and no resilience in the face of adversity. If a lead goes away, it really feels like the game is lost. And up to this point, that's been the case. Beyond the lackluster plate appearances and pitching performances we're seeing from the Twins, it is the endless lapses in judgment and execution that are most baffling and upsetting. Defensive plays were missed constantly in a week where the Twins committed 8 errors, including that game-deciding overthrow from Griffin Jax on Tuesday, routine grounder back to the mound. He airmails it to first, and Bobby Witt Jr., who I just mentioned, that Buxton-type speed, ended up on third base as the eventual winning run in a 2-1 loss. Also on the base paths, Twins just ran into outs repeatedly. They're erasing base runners that their languishing offense just cannot afford to lose. Most egregious was on Saturday when Jose Miranda slid towards second base safely after Detroit's infielder missed the bag on a double play turn. But Miranda failed to notice the umpire's call, even though he turned toward the umpire who was signaling safe. And then he got tagged out while walking back to his dugout. A demotion to AAA quickly followed. In terms of individual laggards, it's a bit tough to single anyone out specifically since almost everyone across the roster is floundering. But here are a few, I would say, strikingly poor performances from the past week that are maybe worth a deeper look. It starts with Carlos Correa, who just can't get going. Even in a week where he showed a little bit of pop, he had 4 doubles, still had a 217 average on the week, and now sits at 164 on the season. With each successive unproductive game from Correa, it gets harder to chalk this up to bad luck or a common cold spell. His plate approach is decent, and he's making plenty of contact, but has generally been into the ground, which is, really what we saw in 2023 when he was trying to battle through that plantar fasciitis. He tapped into 2 more double plays in Kansas City, so he's already at 5 this season through just a couple weeks. That is a 50 grounded into double play pace for the full season. In 23, when he led baseball, he had 30. It feels unnecessary to pile on Jose Miranda, given that he's been banished to the minors, but we do need to acknowledge the brutal series of events that precipitated his demotion. At the plate, he stayed cold over this past week, produced just 2 singles and 11 at-bats, struck out 4 times with no walks. He's now up to 13 strikeouts and 0 walks on the season, the sign of just a really broken approach at the plate. Committed an ugly error at third base while charging in on Thursday, in Kansas City, and then Saturday's base running blunder became the final straw, obviously. Miranda has not looked like a big league caliber player since the first half of last year, really, but at that point he was playing like a man on fire, as I'm sure we all remember. So we know it's in there, and hopefully he can recapture it with a little time to reset himself at AAA. One of the hallmarks of this prolonged stretch of futility for the Twins dating back to the second half of last year has been the Jorge Alcala sudden meltdown. He infamously set off this whole landslide last August by giving up 5 earned runs in 2/3 of an inning in Texas, zapping away a 4-run lead. And Friday night's series opener against Detroit carried a very similar tune. Alcala entered with a 4-1 lead, proceeded to allow 4 consecutive base runners on 2 hits and 2 walks, all of them coming around to score as another big lead vanished 5 days after Minnesota's bullpen had frittered away a 6-run advantage at Target Field. So just some great shows for the home fans there. Really, really fun stuff to watch for the paid people in attendance. The much-hyped Twins bullpen has been good in some respects, and we've seen it at times, including on Sunday. But for the most part, they have been woefully bad at coming through when it matters most. I wrote an article for Twins Daily just a couple days ago talking about this. The Twins ranked 2nd in the American League in ERA, but 3rd to last in win probability added. And if you go back to the start of this whole rotten stretch in mid-August of last year, their win probability added as a bullpen better only than the Chicago White Sox among all major league teams. So, this team was built to have its bullpen carry it, and right now they've been doing the opposite. So that's another thing that's really been frustrating and disappointing about this start. Our trending storyline for the week, here's what I've got my eye on as we flip the calendar or flip the page from Sunday to Monday and enter a new week. Miranda's spiraling performance left the Twins with little choice but to make a move, and Mickey Gasper might well be on his way to the same fate. The 29-year-old rookie underdog made the team this spring based on the hope he could contribute offensively after raking in AAA, but he looks overmatched and, frankly, incapable at the plate. In 21 appearances, the switch hitter has managed 2 singles, both grounders that bled through the infield. So just no authoritative contact of any kind coming from the 5'10" Gasper. The bigger problem is that he appears unusable defensively, which kind of matches the rep. The Twins curiously decided to start Gasper at second base on Tuesday night in Kansas City with Edouard Julien at designated hitter. It took less than 4 innings for Gasper to commit a grievous error on a routine ground ball in an eventual 1-run loss. In fairness to Gasper, this is not really a position he plays. He has made 20 total starts at second base over 6 pro seasons. Got a little action in spring training, but it was a baffling thing, regardless of what you think about Julian's defense at second, and I don't think we're going to see Gasper at second again for the Twins outside of an emergency situation. It's just not somewhere he should be playing in the major leagues. Gasper should really only be an option at first base or DH. And for a role like that, you want someone who is less of a total long shot to produce at all offensively. And those players can be found. Guys who can hit a little bit and, play at the bottom of the defensive spectrum. Even in April, with sparse resources available, they're out there. There could be some names that are interesting. If you want to look internally, it will probably be some time before the Twins are ready to turn to a prospect like Luke Keeschel or Jefferson Morales, although I do think those are names worth keeping an eye on. And another one is Saints teammate Armando Alvarez. He signed a minor league deal during the offseason. I was with the Athletics last year in their system, and he had a really big AAA season for them. He had a 967 OPS in 75 games, which I think caught the Twins' interest as they looked to add some infield depth. Alvarez has been playing third base primarily with St. Paul, but he does have experience at second, first, and the outfield corners. Off to a slow start at the plate this year, so I don't want to downplay that. His OPS is below 550. There's a decent chance he's not going to hit much more than Gasper, but he's someone who could at least be functional defensively as the Twins bide their time and await the return of Royce Lewis, which is still probably, weeks away. So I think Gasper's got the clock working against him at this point. You just can't be, when you're trying to fight your way out of it and find your way some hits and energize the team, you can't have a player on your roster that you can't really use. So that's what I got my eye on. Let's look ahead here and close out by taking a look at what's on the docket, as we always do to close the show. Can the Twins channel their spark of momentum from Sunday's victory into a stabilizing stretch of winning baseball? That's what they need to do, but they will have their work cut out for them in a week that features showdowns with 2 formidable interleague opponents from the AL East. The Mets and Braves are on the docket, a 3-game series at home against the Mets coming on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, followed by a much needed probably off day on Thursday, ending a very long stretch of games with no breaks. And then the Twins will head to Atlanta for the weekend to face the Braves for 3 games. These are 2 teams that were both among the top 5 World Series favorites entering the season. If you look at Vegas odds, and the Mets have played like it. Whereas Atlanta is off to an oddly Twins-esque start. They are 4-11 through 15 games. And to me, maybe that's something that we as Twins fans can take as a little bit of comfort in context. I don't think the Braves are a horrible team, certainly not the worst team in the world. So maybe the Twins aren't either. I know the Twins fans are really associating this cold start with the cold ending to last year, which is entirely understandable. But this is a new season, and it is still mid-April, so time to get going. And the Twins can start doing that. If they can get some good games and some good wins this week, I think that'll go a long way towards maybe starting to build a little bit of confidence and remove themselves from what we've seen so far. But they got to hit. So far, up to this point, they have not won a game where the pitching staff has given up 4 runs or more, and that's going to happen. So the offense has to step up and show they can, come back from a deficit, win games when the pitching staff is not totally shut down. That's really the key that I'm going to have my eye on. And, when you're going up against teams like the Mets and Braves, you better be ready to score some runs if you want to win. So, all right, folks, that's all we have for this week. Please make sure you come by twinsdaily.com. Check out all the great content from our writers and creators. And we will see you next week on the Week in Review.